Hello, and welcome to the Digital Workspace Works podcast. I'm Ryan Purvis, your host, supported by our producer Heather Bicknell. In this series, you'll hear stories and opinions from experts in the field, stories from the front lines, the problems they face and how they solved them, the areas they focused on from technology, people and processes, to the approaches they took that will help you to get to the grips with the digital workspace inner workings.
So, Ryan, I know we were just talking about how we thought about recording these as videos and putting them on YouTube. So I was just complaining about the webcam that's built into my laptop being at the bottom of my screen instead of where it normally is at the top of the screen. So I have one Harry Potter book, the seventh one, and one poetry anthology stacked on top of each other, and then my laptop to try to elevate it to be a little bit more of a normal web camera angle.
Yeah, I can't understand the logic of putting the camera at the bottom. It just makes your angles all wrong.
Yeah.
Like very domineering looking down on the camera.
Yeah, so I'm trying to correct it. I know it's kind of a nightmare for this age of video conferencing to have such a weird angle, but I guess I could be without a camera, which I did lie once on a call and say that I didn't have one at home in my home office. I just didn't want to. Wasn't ready for the webcam that day.
Yeah, I mean, you don't look that. It doesn't look that bad now, and I definitely think that because everyone's been stuck at home, they've had to use the cameras that they previously said didn't work more.
Yeah.
And I've seen some diabolical setups where guys are like they're talking at the laptop, but they've actually used an external camera which is on their side, or they got the laptop on the side and they're talking to the screen where they've got the video call, but you just see the side profile of their face while they're talking. And I get that people aren't comfortable with it yet, but you think after 3 months of doing this, everyone would have figured out these sort of basics.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of those kind of help articles about how to make a good, how to make sure your lighting's okay and, working on the angle and like getting a decent video conferencing setup, because it's not just work, right? It's like all the socialization activities, hanging out with friends, that kind of thing. So I think there is more interest. Before I didn't use my webcam that much, so it wasn't, a huge deal that it's this terrible upshot. But now that I'm using it all the time, it's like, okay, maybe I do need to find a solution to this problem.
Yeah. It's weird. I've been looking at, I've got a desk light now for my camera, which I don't think really works because the side's still dark. So I need to look at another solution for that. And I'm now going to get a standing desk, which means I'm going to have to move my study around. And I'm actually looking more and more at how the light is in the room to decide where I'm going to put the desk. Because it makes a big difference. And I realize it makes a big difference to how tired I am. If there's not enough light in the room, I get more and more tired. And I'm wondering if that's I'm sure someone will come out with a study or something that says fatigue from radiation from the screen versus natural light has affected everyone's productivity in this world.
Yeah, my apartment gets very little light, and it's still early here, so there's really not a lot of light in this room either. So I feel you on that. For the standing desk, are you getting one of those that stands on top of your existing desk, or are you going for the full thing?
No, I think I'll go the full thing. I've looked at those ones you put on your desk, and what I think is the problem with those is that, and some of them look really good and very clever, but I think you end up with the same problem that you would with a normal desk, is that you don't stand as much, because you're going to have there aren't very very wide ones. They're sort of 120 centimeters. I don't know what that is in inches. But that's just enough to have your laptop and maybe your mouse. But it's not enough space to have your notes and your diary and your whatever else. And my desk has got, iPad, iPhone, the microphone, the laptop, docking station, all that stuff. So there's a lot of stuff to have on the desk. So I really want the full piece that goes up and down, because I don't have to reorientate myself while I'm working if I go up or down. And the desk will pretty much be in the standing position all the time anyway. That's the other reason. So I'm looking at one from IKEA, which I think is probably the best of the bunch. Not the most expensive. I mean, you can go more expensive, but it's about £405, I think, or something like that. So I don't know, $500, give or take. Mm-hmm. But it does have, it's an electrical one as opposed to a manual one with the memory settings, and you can set up, via app what you want it to be and stuff like that. And it's quite a nice big one. I think it's 150 centimeters of depth by, no, doesn't sound right. I think it's bigger than my current desk lengthwise, and it's very deep. So there's lots of space. And I think that's going to be the best one to go with, for me at least. So yeah, and then once that's in place, then because I'm finding that if I work the whole day, my back is absolutely wrecked the next morning, and it takes me a good half an hour to stretch it out, and then you can just go sit and do the same thing again. You can sit in a chair and a desk, and and the other thing is you start hunching. So I really want to get away from that. And when I used to work for UBS, which was the first place that I ever had a standing desk, I used to stand 7-8 hours a day, and only sat down like really when I was trying to do some, at the time, some deep thinking work. But most of the time I was on phone calls, so I'd stand and I'd just walk around and stand and walk around. And if you're writing light documents or whatever, typically standing is perfectly fine. So yeah, that's my thinking. We get approval from the boss, then I can bring it in.
Nice. Well, let me know if you like that one, because I have an IKEA not too far from me, and I have also been thinking about upgrading to a standing desk. So good to know that they make one.
They do this. There's a lot of, in the UK. There's a lot of options, and you're looking to spend between 300 and 700, from what I've seen. And IKEA seems to have a nice mid-range option, which gives you all the bells and whistles, but it's not as expensive. So one of the guys at work has bought one, so I'm waiting for his to arrive. And then once he's had his one, then I will probably buy that one. Because, we're at home all the time, so it makes sense to invest in a proper working space.
Exactly. I'm like, I don't know when I'm going to be back in the office. I don't know if it'll be this year, so I'm going to bite the bullet and make a real office.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's, my office will become my daughter's room at some point, so I've got to do this while I can, until I get moved out to the shed outdoors or something.
That's just a few weeks away, right?
Well, when she's born, she'll sleep in our room with us, at least for the first 6 months. Depends how big she is. She's going to be big, but depends how big she is. And then we'll look at, either at that point I'll move out of this room and she'll move in here, and then I'll move next door to the spare room, which is quite big. Or I will go to there's a Regis next down the road from me. It's about a 10-minute walk. And I'll just rent space there and see depends on what that costs, of course. But that might be the way to go.
Yeah.
The only tricky thing about that, and I know we're going to talk about something else, but the tricky thing with when you start renting space is that when you start committing to that space, and in these Regises, you're typically committing to what they've got, not necessarily what you've got. So if I want to use my standing desk, then I may not be able to bring that in there. But that's a problem to solve at that point.
Yeah, for another day.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I know you wanted to talk about the question of, should I learn to code? Should everyone learn to code?
Yeah, so I get this question, not necessarily once a day, but I used to get it quite a lot, where someone that's not grown up in the technology world has this fear, let's say, that they don't know enough and they need to get into it, they need to understand it and whatever. And often it's, what should they do? And these are typically people that are accountants or lawyers or some sort of professional skill set, and they're not exposed to technology per se unless they have, unless it's part of where they work. So, for example, they get given Office 365 to do their email. They get and do their documents. They might have a line of business application that's been built for them. So in the legal profession, you've got something like Ghostwriter, which is the generates legal documents and that sort of thing. But they don't really understand the underlying pieces. They just know how to use the technology, the tool. So the question normally comes about, so how do I, and I think this is a future-proofing, step. So by learning the stuff that they can either pivot into, a more technology-centric role, or they're just trying to protect their job so they don't get caught unawares. So normally how I answer the question is that yes, I think people should learn how to code. They don't need to go and build an application that's going to be sold to millions. I mean, if you can do that. But it's really to go through the thought processes and learning. Programming is a very linear so much, but it's a very logical step-by-step process. And I say not linear completely because you can get to a point where you're doing things out of sequence, which is really fast iterations, and I'll explain what that means in a sec. But the idea is that by learning to program, you learn how to ask good questions, and by planning things before you actually just dive into writing code. And where I say you can get into sort of parallels, if you're working with someone else, you're learning how to collaborate with someone who's working on the same code base, but might be in a different part of the system to where you are, or even overlapping with you, and you're learning how to cope with that. So, I mean, that's sort of the evolution. But to answer the question, I think everyone should learn something.
The future-proofing element reminds me of the film Hidden Figures.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, the women who worked for NASA, and then they were, being the human computers, and then the black women who learned to code where, they made themselves indispensable by switching that skill set.
Yeah.
And I feel like this whole conversation around, is my job going to be automated away, or is automation, are robots coming for my job? I feel like that's something I've seen a lot about in the last few years, especially, with AI becoming more a common part of a lot of software and starting to become something that's less, novel and more just an expectation that you're going to, find a way to work machine learning into your software product, right? If it makes sense. So that's all very interesting. I guess I'm curious what languages, what coding languages you know.
Well, that's a good question. I have to count. And when I say know them, it doesn't mean I'm an expert by any means. I wouldn't say I'm an expert at any of them. But I typically write quite a lot in C#. I've been learning a lot of JavaScript recently. So that's been a bit of a focus. That's really through automation stuff on the iPad. I know Pascal back in the day. I learned some basic. But nowadays, as I say, C#. I did a bit of VB6 back in the day. Java, part of my university. Assembler is part of my university. PowerShell I use now as sort of one of those other tools. I'm learning Python, which I think most people should learn Python. That's probably the most popular and probably the easiest one to pick up. I've written some stuff in Swift. I couldn't get my head around Objective-C. I did some C++. Long before C# was popular. I think, that's PHP back as well, ages ago. So about 11 or 12 languages. There
are a lot of coding languages. That's not even all of them that I know, and I'm not a developer.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's one of those things, when you're learning something, it depends on who you're around. So I learned a lot from my friends who wanted to do something. And it was a case of, well, we need some help writing this, and I'd have to go and learn how to help them to write it. But the concepts are kind of all the same. A lot of those languages are object-oriented. So as long as you understand object-oriented programming, you can pretty much pick up those with syntax. And my biggest problem now, for example, I've been working on something for work, is I've forgotten a lot of things from a syntax point of view. So I have to sit and Google and go, oh, okay, this is how you do that. Or I make it a very basic thing where I show it to another developer who writes every day, and he goes, oh, I can't believe you made that mistake. I'm like, yeah, me either. But it's just a practice thing. If you don't practice it, you forget it. So yeah, that's. But I don't think everyone needs to know 12 languages. I mean, it's the same as you don't need to know 12 linguistic languages. It's good to know one or two and be good and really proficient at them. Something like C# is quite a structured and quite a rigorous language. So you have to follow the sort of how the framework works and do it very, what's the word? It's quite a verbose thing when you want to do something. Whereas something like Python is quite flexible, quite quick and easy to use. You might write in one line what you'd write in 5 lines in C#. And when you're writing a big application, those lines become pretty important to minimize. So yeah, I would say Python for anyone trying to start it out.
Yeah. I only know a little bit of HTML and CSS, which I don't even know if that is quite the same as those other languages. Because, I mean, for me, I have, the practical application of doing a lot of website work. So if I was going to go ahead and learn another one, I feel like maybe JavaScript would make sense next.
Yeah, so most people would not consider CSS or HTML programming language.
Yeah.
So they would be considered markup.
Yeah.
JavaScript would be your natural sort of step into that.
Yeah.
And this is why those sort of questions become very nebulous with people, and you start sort of talking about all these things, and it sounds very complicated, but actually it's not. I think, from a business discussion, and if you can find the person that's willing to do this, for them to understand why things take so long to do. And if you think about building a web page, a very basic web page, it's very easy to put that together in HTML, because you're just writing text, in the sense of like you would a Word document. You have titles, you have bullets, you have paragraphs, you have a header, a footer, very simple, very, very easy thing to translate. And your CSS, your cascading style sheets, just give you colors, and colors for certain things. All my tables must be blue with a border of 3 and whatever it is. That's pretty easy because that's static. That doesn't change. Mm-hmm. We're having something like JavaScript or any other sort of language, you're now starting to bring in dynamic content, which mm-hmm. means you're starting to understand rules, and dynamic in the sense of, if I'm logged in, show me this screen. If I'm not logged in, show me that screen. And that's where it can become very interesting to plan your work, which is why I think everyone should learn how to code something, because you learn to you can literally sit down and write code and go with the flow, but you end up writing twice as much, if not 3 times as much, than if you planned it first, and then wrote the code. Mm-hmm. This thing I was working on, I had an idea in the morning, so I went and wrote it, and then I actually went for a walk with my son, and actually that was such a stupid thing to do, because I wrote the stuff for like 2 hours, and then went back and just deleted it and put in 2 lines, and I did the same thing more efficiently and with a better result. The question is, would I have done that if I didn't write the 2 hours before and really got into the problem and tried to solve it? But yeah, so go back to the point I was trying to make. Once you understand how long it takes to do these things, build a web page, building a dynamic web page, etc., I think the appreciation for what a dev team puts out in 2 weeks, and why you need to have the people to do it, and why you have different roles in the team, becomes a little bit more understandable, and why the investments are what they are in building software. And why, just because you just got an idea for an app, doesn't mean you can just throw it over to someone and say, oh, well, build that and come back to me next week with it. It might be 6 weeks, or a year, whatever it is.
Yeah, my boyfriend's a software engineer, so I'm definitely familiar with a project seeming as, simple enough on my end. But, when he talks about, the work that goes into developing it, like the complexity, even something like we were talking the other day about needing to change just a little bit of text that kind of showed up throughout the product that he's working on. And it was like, oh, well, that should be a simple enough switch, right? But there was, it was, I don't have the language to articulate it, but it was just touching so many other things that it was going to be, it could break this or that. It wasn't so simple as just, replacing that item. So definitely a lot.
Yeah, and then that's a very good, actually, language is one of those, ironically, one of those things. So you could design your user interface, which is what the users will see, based on English for the most part, because that works out fairly well, and you cover most countries in the world. Your challenge comes in is if you want to make your application a multi-regional or multicultural, and you want those labels to change based on the user's culture when they log in. So let's say you've got an English organization, but you've got companies sort of head offices in Germany or Sweden or somewhere else, Switzerland, where they've got French or German or Italian. Those are fairly easy to work out what's on the screen. But now every label has to be able to change based on what language you're looking at it in. So typically a web application. But you need to have someone who translates that word. Now, you got two problems that necessarily come out of that. One is the word that you use in English may be a different length to the word you use in German or Swiss or whatever it is. Then you also have the sort of right to left countries, so anything in Arabic will be different lengths as well. So your whole screen layout can change, which is a bit easier in web, but very difficult on a thick application. And then, of course, you have going into the Asian languages, Japanese or Chinese, which are vertical. How do those look on the screen? And your whole sort of configuration changes. In some cases, some applications are basically built again because they didn't do the research, didn't think of that stuff up front. But then in your same balancing act, you're like, well, I've got to build this product to go and sell it. I can't think of all these problems right now, or I'll never build anything. So you build the easiest thing, which is English, and then you worry about those things later on. And you hope that what you have to change doesn't affect the whole product, which most of the time it does.
Now I'm curious. I know, I know SysTrack is in a number of languages. I think I've only seen the Spanish and Japanese ones, but curious to see. I know we have it in Arabic, but I haven't seen any screenshots, so I'm curious.
Well, the other challenge you have with changing languages, and that was specifically, I think, with SysTrack, was that the database had to go from being Latin-based to being Unicode-based, which was it sounds really easy. Oh, we'll just change the correlation, but actually it probably meant a substantial amount of rework, because Unicode treats characters slightly different. And then this going back to the sort of business use, I don't think they need to care about learning that sort of stuff. Yes, if they're interested, go for it. But just the basics of, building a task management app, which will test a lot of, following the examples one thing, but building it and then changing it to sort of suit your own needs. That will sort of give the experience of what a developer goes through when they're trying to build an application where the functionality has to change. And how to extend it or contract it based on what the needs are. Yeah.
So have you, I've used a little bit of W3 School in the past. What tools have you learned to or used to learn all these different languages?
Well, before the internet existed like it does today, if I go back to sort of VB6 or Assembler or any of those things. In fact, Assembler was still, you could still search for that stuff online. It was textbooks and other developers. You basically would find a book that was, by one of the big publishers and go through the examples and learn that way. And then obviously get to know people who knew the language around you and you'd learn from them. Nowadays, it's a lot easier just to Google examples. And most developers aren't really writing stuff from scratch. They are copying pieces of code that they're finding online and then redoing it into their application, which typically works okay if you understand the code. The problem is most people don't understand the code. So when it doesn't work, they don't know why it doesn't work. And that's normally the sign of a good developer versus a bad developer. That said, there are a few sites that people that usually end up on, which I can't think of. Stack Overflow would probably be the main one that I think of. And there you sort of write the question. I was trying to do something with regular expressions today. So I Googled C# regular expressions. And I come up, a whole bunch of pages, and I sort of go through that looking for what the sort of problem I'm trying to solve. And then I look at the code and go, okay, I understand what they're trying to do. And then I use that code. And then that becomes part of your arsenal. You learn how to do it that way. With Python, which I'm learning at the moment, I bought myself a little Raspberry Pi, which you can install Python on. In fact, I use Python a lot there to manage the Pi. And I'm doing stuff with that just to learn as I go along. And that's, basic stuff, but it's just, a little hobby thing. If you're really looking for a certification or something like that, there are sort of online things like Udemy, or I think Coursera does one now in a couple languages. If you don't have any background, then I would recommend definitely going and getting and code, developing or writing code is something you want to do. Then it's worth going for a full course where they teach you what object-oriented programming is and why you do it and all that sort of stuff. Some people pick that up by reading it, but typically I think it's good to have a course where they take you through because it's like maths, you learn it by layers. We teach you how to add, then we teach you how to multiply, then we teach you how to divide, and then to subtract. You learn in that curve. And then it's networking. It's people finding developers that are better than you and asking them questions until they tell you to go away. And then you find another one.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is just do it. Find an idea, build something, suffer through it till it's built, because that's what most developers do. They work hard and long hours to get it done, and then realize it's never finished, and you've always have an idea to improve it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the best way to learn. It's probably why there's so many people that do end up writing code, even as a hobby, because it's one of those things that you have instant response, because either it works or doesn't work, and you can continuously work on it as a pet project, because there's that tactile feel. Every time I make a change, I can see what that change is going to do, and then I can make another change, and then I have another idea. It's one of the reasons why I don't like to code, is because I know I become completely fascinated by it, and it absorbs all my time, even though it's probably done what it's supposed to have done already. I've always got another idea I want to add in, or an improvement or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not exactly the same, but I know a lot of the engineers at our company. I know a lot of just developers in general, and I hear a lot of them talk about the difference between the coding that they learned to do in school and the stuff that they're doing on the job. In that, in school you had the leisure of like finding the perfect way to do everything, and that's what you were graded on. But then on the job, there's a lot more of like, oh, I'm going to go to Stack Overflow, or, you're really finding like the most efficient way to do things, right? And not the theoretically perfect way. So that just reminded me of stories I've heard.
So that's so true. I remember when I started my Microsoft sort of career, I was doing my tutorials, and I got into an argument with the lecturer because what they were teaching in the tutorial in the real world didn't make any sense. You didn't do it that way. And and it was one of those weeks where and I'll never forget this, because I had an argument with the two sort of senior guys on the team. This conflict between what they were teaching at university and what we were doing in the practical world, and going back to the varsity saying, but this is, I've been taught this, this is wrong, etc. And I actually got failed on that tutorial. But I saw the guy about 10 years later, ironically, in an event here in the UK. And we were joking about it. And he said, yeah, you were right. But you see, when you teach the course stuff, you've got to follow what the course says. And that's the problem, is practically what you taught in a degree is about 5-10 years behind what's in the industry. And they're never going to be in sync. So what you learn at university for computer science is really just theoretical. Mm-hmm. It's not practical. I'd probably say that most of those developers, that unless they were doing stuff on the side, would had to have done 2 or 3 years somewhere else before they came to work at Lakeside. So you have the basics, because you don't walk out being ready to code out of university.
Yeah, I know. I mean, we're right next to the University of Michigan, and I know there's a lot of initiatives there for, I think most of the developers I've talked to did some sort of, some sort of side project, some internship somewhere nearby. There's a lot of opportunities there, whether it's working, doing something for the hospital, or so there are but a few projects that, a lot of opportunities, I feel like, to do that.
Yeah, either you're gonna give them graduate work first, and you basically teach them as grads, or you're gonna look at them doing hobby projects. A developer that comes in and doesn't have a hobby project that he's been working on or she hasn't been working on, you're not going to be getting the best developer. You're going to get a 9 to 5er. And I mean, I say this sort of tongue in cheek. That's not a bad thing. But if you're looking for top notch, really, really high caliber talent, they've got hobbies. And those hobbies are still more coding. It's not less coding, because they are absolutely, bought into that realm. I remember I worked with a guy who wrote his own version of search for SharePoint. At the same time, he was working on Mozilla browser. This was a search that we won awards for. That's now the search you have in SharePoint. Well, it's not his search, but it's the same design. It's that kind of caliber. So if you're looking for that, you want to see the side projects. You want to know that they are constantly challenging themselves with the most complicated problems.
Mm-hmm.
So you haven't learned anything from your boyfriend on coding yet?
No, I mean, I probably could if I would. He just built a Discord bot not too long ago. I definitely could have jumped in a little bit on that project. No, actually, funny enough, I asked for, I think it was my birthday a couple years ago, for this coding kit that is, it's a Harry Potter themed one. So you get this like wand, and it's designed for kids, right? Obviously. But I was like, maybe this will motivate me to code. And it was the same year. I think I bought him the Nintendo Labo stuff. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but like the cardboard that you fold up, and he kind of did a few of those projects and abandoned that. And I did a few of the coding projects and abandoned it. So I actually, with you bringing this topic up, I'm curious to delve back and try it again. Because the problem I was having at the time was that I was trying to use the iPad for it. And it, something about however the device was sensing the wand wasn't syncing up right. So I need to try like a laptop or something else. But I am curious to see if that kind of thing can, because I feel like the approach there is going to be very different. If it's geared towards children, you're learning in a way that's a little bit more, I guess, less overt than if I learned, the theory itself. So I don't know if it'll work for me or not as well to try to do it in the more hands-on kind of way.
Yeah, I bought that Harry Potter thing for my wife ages ago. She's never used it. So I do the Arduino stuff. Or I did the Arduino stuff for a while, which is again, it's like a little not a Raspberry Pi, but it's a very similar little thing, and you can wire up lights and resistors and capacitors, all electronics. But you can write a bit of Python for that, and that's not too bad. But I find with that stuff, a friend of mine is really into it. He builds a lot of really cool stuff. Like he manages his whole house back in Joburg has got solar panels with batteries, and his pool works on this setup, and he's got something else set up in the garden. He's got all these little things that he's built. So I definitely think that they're quite powerful. I mean, they're much more powerful than they were as options 5-10 years ago. But yeah, I mean, it does come down to just sitting down and doing it. Mm-hmm. Fortunately.
Well, see, I had this vision that I could then program this wand to do things like, turn on my smart lights or turn them off, or like, I don't know if you can connect those things in any way, but no.
No, unfortunately. So what you could do with the Arduino, because when you buy the Arduino, I bought a little kit, and it's about sort of rectangular block, and on there is all your chips and stuff. But you get mini ones, which are probably let's say probably the same size as this AirPods case, and that you can put an accelerometer on that. You can fire that all up. And this friend of mine does these sorts of things. He'll join them all together, and he'll 3D print a box to put them in. You could do something with that would plug into your Wi-Fi and do stuff, because the little components are available. It's amazing what you can buy, and they're not expensive. You're talking about $1, $2 a component. So it's not expensive to build anything. So that would work. Unfortunately not with the Harry Potter wand.
Yes, sadly.
But I would. There's actually a very good channel on YouTube. I can't think what the guy's name is. He's a mechanical engineer, and he actually built a golf club that had a whole bunch of actuators on it. So that basically it's one club that does all the clubs, and it changes the angle of the face depending on which club you're going to use. And then it also changes the face to keep you straight when you hit the ball. I need to see if you can improve your scores, and that. A very clever thing to watch. How you build. I mean, this thing's got wires all over the place and whatever to make it work, but it's fascinating. And that's the kind of thing that's the maker world, which I think there's a lot of people making stuff during this pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what I need is just a project, a goal, learn it to do something with it, not just for the sake of it. So I know, you mentioned building your own sort of simple task management app or whatever however you would apply the code. But I think maybe that's just a strategy for learning it in general, is to be building something. Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I, for example, in our old house, I had a huge issue with humidity in the bathrooms. So I built a little sensor with the Wi-Fi. So it was probably as big as a baseball, with the sensor and the Wi-Fi unit, and then a double two AA batteries to power it, and that measured the humidity in the room. So I could see what part of the days were the worst, and then use that as a way to change the heating in the house, because that was causing the issue with the damp. They're very easy things to do once you get your head around it. Nice and simple problems to solve.
Great. Well, now I feel like I need to go learn to code, but we will see. I do have a teacher if I need one.
Honestly, I would probably say if you really, I mean, the Raspberry Pis are really good, and they're not expensive. You're looking at $35, I think, or $30 to get one.
Yeah, we have one. I just, yeah. I don't think I've even looked at it, but yeah.
Oh, there you go. It's
accessible.
Yeah, no, it's a good challenge. I mean, my brother uses them quite a lot. Like he set up one as his VPN client for his house, for his proxy as well. So they're nice. Get these quite a nice magic mirror that some of these guys make, where they use a Raspberry Pi to power like a TV, so a nice thin LED, and it goes and collects like your weather information, your diary, all that kind of stuff. And they put the TV on a frame, and then they put a mirror, not a mirror, but it's a type of glass. It's a glass with a treatment on it, so you can see through the mirror to the screen, but you can also see yourself in the mirror. And that's got all your information on it. So you can see your diary and all that stuff. And then the Pi is keeping it going, keeping it refreshed. And then you've got this, beautiful magic mirror, as they say. That's a nice project to do as well, if you got the carpentry skills.
Yeah. Is that how have you seen the new like fitness mirrors that are like Peloton, but in a mirror form where you can...
I've not seen them, but I would expect it's exactly the same.
Yeah.
Technology. I mean, if you look at I don't know what the fitness mirrors cost, but I think you're probably looking at about $200 to build the. And I think they're probably doing other things as well. But I wouldn't be surprised if that was the next thing you had in your house was a mirror that you looked into that told you all about your weight and your, whatever. Mm-hmm. Or a smart mirror, let's say, more than a magic mirror.
Yeah. I like magic mirror more. Everything is smart now. Got my smart lights, my smart coffee maker, my smart mirror.
Do you use much smart stuff in your house?
Yeah, I have the Hue bulbs. Some smart speakers. I think that might be kind of the extent of it. The lights are kind of, it's nice to be able to, I have the ones that aren't just white that do different colors. So it's not something I use a ton for that purpose, but just, dimming them and, leaving the house, having them automatically turn off once you're a certain distance away or turn on when you're, coming home is nice.
Yeah. Yeah. We've got downlighters now. So I don't know if I can get something for that. I think I've changed the light switches themselves. So that's my next project once we get there, I guess. But I quite liked having, I had a nice reading light that I used to set on a schedule. And if we weren't at home and the dogs were in the lounge and all that sort of stuff, it would automatically turn on. Mm-hmm. Just useful stuff like that. Quite like it from that point of view. I haven't, like my neighbors, they've got they got colours in the garden, and the colours change based on the schedule. And if they're watching a movie, then they have a sort of movie scene come lighting and all that kind of stuff. I know when they're watching a movie.
That's really fun, though. Cool.
So you're gonna learn to code. That's the next challenge, huh?
We'll see. I might break out that Harry Potter kit again just to make the purchase worth it. But I'll give that a go.
Good stuff. How's your ergo going? Your rowing thing?
Going really well. Very happy that we made that purchase. And it came with a year subscription to iFit, which is just one of these has workout programs on there and a lot of rowing workouts, and it syncs with the machine. So it'll up the magnetic resistance for you.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And it just is like a guided workout. Actually, the series I'm doing now was filmed, the guy's rowing in Zambia. And I'm actually finding it very stressful because he's on this river and he's talking about how there's hippos all around and crocodiles. And he's constantly, it feels like he's dodging the hippos, and he's talking about how deadly they are. And I'm like, why are you rowing on this river? So I feel like that's just getting my heart rate up, worrying for this guy. But I guess, yeah. Is
that only audio or is that video as well?
A video.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
so
they must.
They're on the same route as Peloton then, or any of those other things.
Yeah, so that's been, I think I'm hooked on that subscription because it is very nice to basically have that personal trainer kind of component where they're telling you what to do. And I do think it helped me learn to row better, to understand power versus speed of rowing. So get my technique down. So
cool.
Yeah. Recommend.
Yeah, I've been impressed because we, as part of our health membership, we got 4 months of Peloton to use during the pandemic, while the pandemic's going on. And I've been impressed with that experience in the sense of the personal trainer doing the class. I mean, I don't do the live classes. I do them sort of the next day or whenever I want to do them. But just having this person who's recognizing other people while you're working out, even though you know that it's a recording, it's quite good. Quite like that. I might, if I ever get the money, invest in a Peloton or something similar, just because it's nice. I like the interactive nature of it.
Yeah, and I think it's nice too to sit down for 40-minute, 45-minute class, whatever it is, and then you're in that class, versus if I was just doing it on my own, maybe with some music or watching something else, it'd be more I feel at a certain point you might be more aware of physical discomfort, and it's you might not make it as long as an interactive class component. So
yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that's because I was doing insanity videos before that, and I was kind of getting bored of doing the same routine all the time. And I mean, they're still tough. It's not like I can do them without breaking a sweat. They are still tough, but it's like, oh, okay, no, I don't like this exercise. I don't really want to do this one. Just getting to that sort of thing. Whereas by doing the Peloton ones, which are still, head workouts, every single one I don't know, so it's completely new and fresh. And I'll still mix in my Insanity ones because I think the Insanity ones are tougher. But at least I'm breaking them up with completely fresh material. That's always refreshing, which is also quite nice.
Yeah, some of the rowing workouts are HIIT style where you'll row for a bit and then get off and do different things. And some of them involve like you'll put your feet on the seat and do sort of like inchworm plank kind of stuff and use the machine as like a different sort of workout tool, which is very interesting. So definitely more creative than I would have been on my own with it.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is that, some of the stuff you think, where did these guys come up with this? Where did they think of, doing this on the machine? Because you just get on and row. But yeah, I could definitely see how that's interesting.
The only problem is now I really want to try out actual rowing, in a boat.
Okay.
But I don't know when I'll be able to get my hands on that. So need to train up so that by the time I do it, it will be a breeze.
Have you did you get my invite to join on Apple Watch?
No.
I
don't. I'll have to check. I've never. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I've never connected with someone on Apple Watch before, so I don't know how the thing pops up.
I sent it to your Gmail account.
Okay.
Right. So I don't know what's your Apple ID? Is that Gmail or something else?
I believe it's my Gmail. I've had it for so long, but it should be my Gmail. I probably just need to check my email.
Well, yeah, because it's invite again. So I've just sent you another invite now.
Okay. My Gmail tends to get buried in a lot of just,
That's cool. Otherwise, you can always invite me, and then it's easier.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, then I'll have to be honest with my stay honest with my my workout schedule. Someone knows.
That's funny enough what it is. My mates come on my watch. I'm like, I haven't done anything today, and they've done a workout or they've gone played golf or something, and I'm like, I need to go work out. It's the right thing. It's good. It's good and healthy. Yeah.
Our time zones are going to be very different too, which is.
Well, you're going to wake up to me having done my workout every morning.
Yeah. Ryan's already done it. I haven't even woken up yet, and Ryan's already done his workout.
Super. Should we close it off there?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're good.
Alrighty.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Heather Bicknell is our producer and editor. Thank you, Heather, for your hard work on this episode. Please subscribe to the series and rate us on iTunes or the Google Play Store. Follow us on Twitter @the DWW Podcast. The show notes and transcripts will be available on the website www.digitalworkspace.works. Please also visit our website www.digitalworkspace.works and subscribe to our newsletter. And lastly, if you found this episode useful, please share with your friends or colleagues.